From changing your player color palette to hidden buildings and graffiti, these are 17 secrets you didn't know in Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. So I've been playing these games since they came out, and for that reason, I was very surprised to see something I didn't know about at the very start of the game. In Crystal, there is a save corruption exploit you can perform to actually change the color palette of your character. It basically works to give you the female character in orange or the male character in blue. To do this, you start a new game, select a character, and then save and reset your game upon entering the world. The sex you choose here will be the character that you get. From here, you then start another new game with the opposite character and save again, but this time you turn off your game as the 3 dots appear on the word saving. And so performing this glitch right will take the color palette of the second character and place it onto the character you chose first. And huge shout out to Mike Taylor Gaming for showing me this exploit. Now, one intentionally interesting feature of Pokemon Gold and Silver is that they actually had different Pokemon sprites between the games. To my knowledge, this is the only game in the entire series that did this. And while for the most part these details aren't too different, there is one fun detail in Gold that is actually mind-blowing. The sprite design for Kabutops is well, bad. And I actually realized that this is simply just a slightly modified version of the Kabutops Gen 1 sprite. Like, yeah, the silver version is great, but my poor gold Kabutops really got done dirty. Now, another interesting difference between these two games is actually the addition of one more item in Gold. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the super rare item held by Ho-Oh called the Sacred Ash. Not able to be used during battle, it revives all of your teammates to full health when used. So, in other words, it's 5 max potions and 5 revives. But the thing that I found really interesting about this is that it actually puts Gold as having one extra obtainable item than Silver. Lugia, and actually Suicune for that matter as well, do not have secret held items. And this was because originally the plan for this game was to be a single release, with Ho-Oh being the box art legendary. It was only later decided to split the games up again, and this is the reason Lugia does not have an item. And that's certainly not the only difference between game versions. In the Japanese version of Pokemon Crystal, there is actually a completely different Pokemon Center in Goldenrod City. Way bigger than the original Pokemon Center, this is actually called the Pokécom Center. And that's not the only secret that exists in Goldenrod City. You remember the Sudowoodo blocking the path to Ecruteak City? Well, if you use a move like Roar or Whirlwind against the Sudowoodo, it will show an animation of it running away after the battle. Still though, this is not the only secret revolving around Sudowoodo. So if you don't activate the Sudowoodo vent and use a walkthrough wall glitch to get onto the next route, you can actually see the 2 twins that you would normally battle north of this route not properly loaded. I don't really know what's going on here, and it's the only instance in the game where I've ever seen this happen. Interacting with the top and bottom of these characters will just show you the 2 different versions of the overworld sprite for Sudowoodo, but talking to them on their left and right then turns them into surfing Laprases? It's a very weird glitch that only happens to them and no other NPCs. Now, before we get away from Goldenrod City, there still is one other cool secret. While the Gyarados in the Lake of Rage has a 100% chance to be shiny, it's not the only easy shiny you can obtain through these games. Below Goldenrod exists the daycare, and upon your first visit, you will actually receive an egg. And it can be one of the many baby Pokemon introduced into this game. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's actually a 14% chance for this egg to be shiny. But moving away from Goldenrod and onto Ecruteak City has even more secrets. So in Pokemon Crystal, we find the 3 legendary beasts at the bottom of the burned tower. But going through the game files actually reveals cut NPC dialogue referencing the Entei movie. It says, oh no, my daughter is missing. No, she couldn't have gone to the burned tower. I told her not to go near it. And so this is a direct reference to what actually happens in that movie. A girl goes missing with Entei. Now, why this was ultimately cut is unknown, but it's still a very cool little piece of information. Perhaps it was a side quest that they just didn't have enough space for. But that's not the only cool thing in Ecruteak. While most stone evolutions were near impossible to get before Kanto in these games, there is one consistent option I never knew about. Once you get the TM Surf, you can access the second room in the ruins of Alf. And while basically useless in Gold and Silver, they actually added reward puzzles in Crystal. Upon completing the Surf room and using the TM Flash, a secret room opens up. And the room contains 4 items, with one of them being a moonstone, which is actually a pretty big deal, because this means you can get a Nidoking by the 4th gym. And while not the beast it was in Gen 1, it's still a nice option for your team in a game that was lacking huge diversity. Also, I didn't know that Crystal had this. I really thought it was just a Heart Gold and Soul Silver thing. Seeing that room open up for the first time was pretty cool. But one thing that is exclusive to Crystal is this friendship feature. So if you level up a Pokemon on the route you caught it in this game, it actually gets additional friendship bonus. And what's especially cool is there is a trainer on Route 39 north of Olivine who actually references this. She will only battle you at night, and upon beating her, she tells you that Pokemon gain more friendship by battling them on their home route. Now, moving south of this route, we end up in the oceanside city of Olivine. Now, credit to Pete Caspray for finding this, but there is actually a secret house in the top left corner of Olivine City. Like, I'm talking if you go all the way up to the far left corner and use a glitch to access it, you will actually fall down into a secret house. It seems as though there was supposed to be another building in this place, and instead of completely cutting it, they just lazily kind of moved it off to where the player couldn't access. What's even cooler is that the lady in here references the pharmacist being in Ecruteak City rather than Cyanwood. Now, one secret probably a lot of you know about is the GS Ball. Available on the Virtual Console, this was an item that allowed you to catch Celebi in the Ilex Forest. So I've probably spent over 100 hours going through the Pokemon Crystal game code, and there is actually a string of code for the North American version, which includes this. The thing is that it was only turned on in Japan. But if you actually change the game files for the North American version, you can still do this. You just set a line of code to true, and after beating the Elite Four, you go to Goldenrod City and a nurse just simply gives you the GS Ball. You then go to Kurtz into the Ilex Forest and you catch yourself a mythical. But upon beating the Elite Four, that's not it. Because if we go over to Kanto and head to Celandon City, there's a very fun little Easter egg. In the big building where you get an Eevee in Gen 1, on the top floor, if you go to the top right corner and hit A on the side of the stairs, you can actually draw a mustache on graffiti. A very weird, small little Easter egg that they definitely didn't need to put in. But then again, Kanto's bare enough as it is, so maybe I appreciate it. But that's not the only weird feature. Between Cerulean and Saffron City, what was the daycare in Gen 1, this building has a sign on the door, and if you press A, it says that it's for sale and nobody lives there. The weird thing is that you can just walk right on in and there are people. Now, while most areas of Kanto were cut, there was one area that had a fun secret to it. Mount Moon is small, but does still exist in this game. And if you go all the way through at night on Tuesdays, you can actually see a short scene of Clefairies dancing around a rock. And upon smashing that rock, you actually get a free moonstone. And this is not the only rare item found in Kanto. While Cerulean Cave was cut, you can still find a Berserk gene outside of Cerulean Cave, or where Cerulean Cave would have been. This is the only game where this item is available, and it's very odd. At the cost of confusion, it raises the Pokemon's attack. And honestly, it's probably for the best that this thing was cut. Imagine giving this to a Pokemon that has own tempo. You'd enter battle, get a free +2 attack, and then you can't even get confused. But overall, this is a very nice little reference to Mewtwo. But probably the coolest secret and reference to Pokemon Red and Blue revolves around Snorlax. So in Gen 1's Kanto, there are 2 separate Snorlaxes within the game. But in Generation 2's version of Kanto, there is only one near Diglett's Cave. I always thought that this was a random design choice, but it's actually way more cool than that. Because as it turns out, there are still 2 Snorlaxes in Kanto. But this is a simple reference to the fact that Red caught one and put it in his party. You don't see it until the final battle upon Mount Silver. Now, if you learned something new, maybe consider subscribing, and I'll see you later.